Deep in the heart of Texas, a remote ranch sits silently under the scorching sun. But on one fateful afternoon back in 1994, several silent 911 calls sent shivers down the spine of the police dispatcher. Racing against time, a team of police officers descended upon the property, unsure of what to expect. As they broke through the front entrance, what they discovered within the walls of the ranch was nothing short of shocking. Hi folks, I'm Johnny and welcome to The Oddest. The body of Olivia Mabel was discovered wearing her nightgown and slippers. She was still seated in a rocking chair, and that's when things get really weird. Losing a child is an immense source of pain for any caring parent. The departure of such a precious being who brings so much happiness to their life is the ultimate nightmare for every mother and father. The journey of grief that follows is excruciating, leaving them feeling isolated and overwhelmed. The tragedy of having to bury their own child often leads to lifelong depression and, in some cases, self-destruction for those who bear the weight of this heartbreaking experience. This tragedy struck a household in Salina, Texas in March of 1990 at the Footlights Ranch. This was a 13-acre property located approximately 1 hour north of Dallas and was owned by Travis and Olivia Mabel. The couple had moved there in 1983 shortly after the birth of their son Aiden. They were a happy couple, and like most young families, they hoped to expand by purchasing a larger home. During those first few years, they doted heavily on their only child. On the afternoon of March 13th, 7-year-old Aiden asked his mother if he could go play on the sprawling grounds around the ranch. Olivia agreed on the condition that he returned in time for dinner. Aiden was ecstatic as he set off on another boyhood adventure, and Olivia didn't see him for the rest of the afternoon. As we all did back then, I often remember returning home from my own adventures, often covered in dirt and grass stains. However, by 5:30 p.m, Aiden had not yet returned, and his dinner was sitting on the table getting cold. Both parents searched for Aiden, thinking he was probably having too much fun and had lost track of time. However, the reality of the situation was far worse. They found Aiden floating face down in a pond not too far from their home. Sadly, the wee boy had fallen in and had drowned. To say that Travis and Olivia were devastated by the loss of their son is obviously an understatement, and unfortunately their relationship just wasn't strong enough to withstand the immense heartache and pain that they both experienced. Both Travis and Olivia were overwhelmed with guilt, and they blamed themselves and each other for their loss. Olivia withdrew completely from society. She stopped working and she cut off contact with her friends, her family and even her husband. The couple eventually divorced the following year and Travis moved to the east to start anew. Olivia, on the other hand, she chose to remain at the ranch, living in seclusion and surrounded by 13 acres of wilderness. No one ever saw or heard from her again, except for a brief sighting by a neighbour in late 1991. For years, Olivia lived in complete seclusion, ignoring phone calls, letters and visitors to the house. People began to wonder if she even still lived at the property, until an eerie incident on the 27th of February in 1994. That day, the Salina Police Department received a 911 call from an unknown source. The operator who answered the call heard only silence, and after a couple of minutes, the line clicked and cut off. As protocol dictated, the police department traced the call but found nothing. However, before long, the phone rang a second time, and the operator was met with the same eerie silence. 3 calls were made from the same number, all silent and all traced back to the same address: the Footlights Ranch. The question on everyone's mind was, who was calling and what was happening out there at Olivia's house? A patrol car was sent to the Mabel residence to investigate. After a brief inspection of the ranch, the officers in attendance noticed that the front door of the house had warped due to its neglect and the changing temperature of the seasons that have come and gone, and with the door having been out of use for a considerable time. So the door had bowed, causing it to jam shut in the frame. They were unable to get a view through any of the windows as they had all been whitewashed, so there was only one thing for it: they had to force entry. Once inside, the officers were met with an eerie sight. The main hallway and all of the adjoining rooms had not been touched for years. A thin layer of dust covered every surface and cobwebs hung from every corner. This was the same scenario with each room that the officers entered. All except one. The officers' search took a different turn when they came across Aidan's room. Unlike the rest of the house, everything in this room was immaculate and orderly, with all his clothes and toys neatly stored away in drawers and in cupboards. There was no trace of dust or cobwebs. Right in the centre of the room, they discovered Olivia Mabel, Aidan's mother, sitting in a rocking chair, dressed in a nightgown and slippers. She was deceased. She was clutching a small doll that resembled her son and wrapped in fragments of his clothing. In front of her was a makeshift altar decorated with candles, fresh flowers, and Aidan's possessions, along with photographs and drawings of him, all created in his honour. I mean, that's creepy enough, right? Well, it's about to get creepier, because amongst the strange things that they saw in the house that day, the most mysterious aspect was that Olivia had been dead for months. As the officers searched through Aidan's toys, they came across a collection of heartbreaking letters written by Olivia, grieving the loss of her son. The discovery was a deeply upsetting experience for everyone present, and a question that remained unanswered was, who made the 911 calls that brought the police to the scene? Officer Santiago, who was among the first responders, described what she found on that fateful day.
Well, honestly, it still just doesn't make any sense. I remember being there and it was just freezing cold inside that house and it was warm outside. She was just sitting in a chair and I can't tell, like, we still don't know how long she had been there for. She was just there, dead, and there was a crib in the corner. She wasn't pregnant or anything. No one found anything about that. It was just there. It was very strange, I would say. There were a lot of photos and personal objects on that, and candles, and, well, it's things you actually use to see in what we call santuarios. It's like this place with personal objects of the deceased and certain, how would I describe this? It's like chants or things that are written down like a prayer. And I wouldn't recommend, even if someone put that out there, they were definitely trying to do something that I wouldn't even recommend going into. There was something just really evil in that house. It's the kind of thing that once you mess with it, it just doesn't stop.
There were no signs of forced entry, aside from the front door, which the police had forced open, and there was no indication that anyone else had entered or visited that property. All doors and windows were locked from the inside, and even the phone was untouched. It had a thin layer of dust over it, indicating that it had not been used to make any calls, especially the 911 calls. Things became even more bizarre when an officer examined one of the letters written by Olivia. The letter contained the following words.
My Aidan, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I should have never let it get like this. I'm leaving. I will not let you keep me, you vile, evil creature. Mommy's coming for you, Aidan. My sweet Aidan. Mommy loves you.
As the investigators delved deeper into this case, their fear and confusion only grew. Their hearts sank when they stumbled upon a letter dated February 27th, 1994, the same day that Olivia's lifeless body was discovered in her home. They couldn't shake the eerie feeling that something sinister was at play here. As they combed through the evidence, they found several ominous signs that hinted at Olivia's involvement in occult practices. The makeshift altar dedicated to Aidan was adorned with strange symbols and characters written in Sanskrit. The translation was bone-chilling. The words spelled out construct and to build. Their blood ran cold when they pieced together that Olivia had been attempting to create a tulpa, a thought form. A theory emerged that Olivia had been using her grief to create an entity in the image of her son. Tibetan Buddhism shed light on this practice, suggesting that a being could be brought into existence through sheer spiritual and mental discipline and the concentration of powerful thoughts. Given her overwhelming emotional state, it was possible that Olivia had constructed a being of pure thought. But what was more chilling was the possibility that this entity may have slipped out of her control. The letter dated February 27th only added fuel to this theory. Did this entity manifested from Olivia's intense grief and powerful concentration of thought take on a life of its own? Did it turn against her and take her life in the process? Sergeant Santiago couldn't shake off the eerie feeling that the presence in the house was more than just grief or a figment of imagination. She and her fellow officers felt an inexplicable, strong and angry presence looming over the household when they arrived. This case in its entirety was difficult to explain without considering the paranormal. Every single aspect of the case seemed to suggest that there was more to the story than meets the eye. The investigators couldn't help but wonder if Olivia had opened a portal to the other side, or if she had awakened something that she just couldn't put back to sleep. To this day, the property remains empty and unsold. The current owner, Christopher Hagen, has had no luck in finding a buyer in almost 25 years. Prospective buyers are warned off by the oppressive atmosphere that descends upon them as soon as they enter the home. Even the current owner, Christopher Hagen, has reported multiple paranormal occurrences whilst carrying out renovations on the property. In 2005, Hagen invited a renowned paranormal investigator, Drew Navarro, to visit the house. Navarro claimed that out of the hundreds of locations that she has studied, she has never felt such an imposing force. Upon entering the home, she found herself struggling to breathe as if the very air had become thick and suffocating. She described feeling a constant shifting energy that behaved erratically, like a jealous child throwing a tantrum. At no point did she feel welcome or invited. Instead, the house felt hostile and menacing. Navarro concluded that the house should be avoided at all costs, and that a serious intervention was needed. Even she didn't know what she was dealing with. It's clear that there is something deeply unsettling about this property. The energy that lingers within its walls is powerful, malevolent, and not to be trifled with. The cause of Olivia Mabel's death remains a mystery. It's unclear whether she died of a broken heart or if there was something more sinister at work here. It's possible that someone entered the home, wrote the letter, and made the call to the police, but this theory is weakened by the fact that there were no signs of forced entry. The phone and the house in general had not been disturbed in months, making it very unlikely that an intruder could have been responsible for this. So what's really happening here? Taking everything into account, this leaves us with the possibility that the incident may simply have never happened at all. It's difficult to comprehend why someone would fabricate such a disturbing scenario, but it's not unheard of for people to seek attention or to cause confusion and chaos for their own selfish purposes. So, although a death certificate exists for young Aidan, there's nothing relating to the passing of Olivia Mabel. Even more strange is the fact that there are no news articles, broadcasts, or anything relating to this case. Back in 1991, a very similar and creepy story hit the headlines about a guy called Christopher Case. He died under super creepy circumstances. This, however, was well documented, and in fact, it's one of the first videos that I made for this channel. I'll leave a link in the description below. You'd think that the media would be all over this story, but I couldn't find anything. The first reports of this bizarre case only started to surface online, coincidentally, around the same time that a Kickstarter campaign was launched for a short amateur movie called Thoughtform. So, what, was this all just made up for an amateur movie? All the people, all the photos, all the audio recordings, even Footlights Ranch itself doesn't exist. I even spent a few hours digging around online at the Salina Police Department, and I couldn't find any record anywhere of there ever having been a Sergeant Francesca Santiago. The objective here was to create a movie named Thoughtform. That would serve as the inaugural launch of a podcast network called Elf Tree Media. The movie's production was handled by inexperienced individuals with no significant names attached to this project. However, due to a lack of penetration into pop culture, the marketing campaign failed to generate sufficient interest. Consequently, the Kickstarter campaign designed to raise funds for the movie's budget was unsuccessful, leading to the termination of the project without ever being produced. The photos of young Aidan and Olivia are just actors. They even created the character of Drew Navarro, the paranormal investigator. Look, I wish I could say that it was job well done, that this elaborate hoax paid off and the movie was a success, but it never even got made, despite the original Kickstarter goal only being 10 grand. To be fair, hoax or not, it's a great wee story. It's one of my favourites, and until I found out it was all fake, I was kicking my pants. It's funny because a wee part of me always gets disappointed when I have to debunk these types of stories. Anyway, that's enough spooky stuff for one day. Let's get a wee cup of tea on the go, and if you fancy a truly creepy and real story, then check out my link for the Christopher Case video. And if you've got this far, you may as well subscribe, eh? It's free, and it means that you'll know when I upload more videos. Stay safe out there, folks. Tell someone that you love them. And remember, keep smiling.